I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm so glad you're here because today we are going to explore your storytelling in the disruptive direct-to-creator world on platforms like Substack and how you can earn what you deserve from your creative content. And to help you with your brand, sales, and marketing storytelling, I've got two short online courses called The ABTs of Selling and our new ABTs of Branding waiting just for you over at businessofstory.com. In under 30 minutes, you will learn how to wield the and, but, therefore foundational narrative framework to revolutionize how you communicate, to become more confident in your messaging, compelling in your delivery, and persuasive in how you don't just move, but excite your audiences to action. So check out both courses right now at businessofstory.com, and you'll be glad you did, because today's guest, a legendary Silicon Valley marketer, has used the ABT to great effect in his work. Christopher Lochhead is a 9-time #1 best-selling author, #1 charting Apple podcaster, top 0.5% business newsletter creator, and is best known as the godfather of category design. Chris and his team now also have one of the top performing newsletters on Substack, and you might say he's a bit bullish on the direct-to-creator model.
They are so desperate at Inc. magazine because they're a dying breed. All of those guys are dying because the direct-to-creator model is crushing them, because people realize it doesn't matter that Forbes' logo is on the thing. As a matter of fact, Forbes takes content that people pay them to write for them and charge us to read. And so all of them have adopted this asinine model, and they're so desperate for clickbait, they have sunk to the level of Gawker.
Lockhead's two books, Play Bigger and Niche Down, were the first on the management discipline of brand category design. And you could say he's actually the category king in category design because of all of his other creative outputs, including Category Pirates newsletter being the #1 paid newsletter on, you guessed it, category design, and the Category Pirates series, which are the #1 charting Amazon mini books. He's also got not one, but two podcasts on category design called Follow Your Different, and the other one is Marketing in Category Design Podcast. Makes sense, right? So those are quite some accomplishments coming from a dyslexic paperboy from Montreal who got thrown out of school at 18. With few other options, he became an entrepreneur, then 3-time Silicon Valley public company chief marketing officer, and an investor/advisor to over 50 venture-backed startups. The Marketing Journal calls him, quote, one of the best minds in marketing. NBA legend Bill Walton calls him a quasar. And The Economist calls Chris off-putting to some. Some podcast reviewers think he is overrated and, well, not quite worth it. In fact, podcaster Neil Perlberg calls Follow Your Different the worst business podcast, while Podcast Magazine calls Follow Your Different the best business podcast. I think Christopher Lochhead might be a bit polarizing, but I'll leave that up for you to decide, because he believes that if you're lucky enough to make it to the top of the mountain, you should probably throw down a rope. And don't be surprised with that rope come a lot of F-bombs in the process. So brace yourself for the most vocal proponent of category design and the marauding pirate wielding the direct-to-creator model to help you right now on the Business of Story. Christopher, welcome back to the Business of Story.
Thank you, brother. It's great to be with you again.
You were here, years ago, show number 97. Since then, we've done about 250 shows.
Wow, that's a lot of shows. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was we were just recognized on FeedSpot as the #1 business storytelling podcast in the intergalactic universe.
Well, that makes you the category king, doesn't it, Park?
Well, I hope so. And I'd like to kind of hold on to that. And that's some of the stuff we're going to be talking about today, Christopher. When I first met, and do I call you Chris or Christopher?
I really don't care. I respond to lots of things. I'm not one of these precious people who like these things matter. I met this gal one time, and if you read her name, you would read it aloud as Sarah. And she corrected everybody and said she wanted to be called Sarah. And so, look, I'll call anybody anything they want, but I'm not a princess. You can call me whatever you like.
All right, Sarah, you got it. But when we first met a few years ago, you had come out with your book, Play Bigger. And to me, I'm like, oh God, here we go. Another branding marketing book. Does the world really need it? And then I found your approach to brand point of view, category design, and the way you talked about it. And I got to tell you, I'm not blowing any smoke here, Chris. It revolutionized my world after 30 years of being in branding. I had a sense for it, but it was never as clearly articulated for me as what you did in that book, Play Bigger. And I got to say that that's probably the one book that I have recommended to more of my clients than any of the hundreds of books I've read. So thank you for your category design approach.
You're very welcome, and thank you for those kind words. I'm glad it made such a difference for you, Park.
And what I want to know is, when did it hit you? When, because I'm sure this isn't something you were just born with a silver category design spoon in your mouth. I mean, you must have done trial and error and gone through it until you arrived at your particular approach. How did that come about?
So we recently just wrote a category pirates on this, the concept of living your point of view. And one of the things that I shared from a personal perspective is category design is not an idea that I have or had. It has me. And so from the time I was very young, I got a newspaper route when I was 10 or 12, something like that. And from that age forward, I just started thinking about, well, how come the paper company doesn't do this? And what about that? And it sort of set this cascading thing in my head about sort of questioning everything. And why is it that way? And how come it got designed that way? And who says it should be this way? And I can remember being probably 5 years old and asking my Uncle Jim, who was a college poli-sci teacher, Uncle Jimmy, how do you change a law? So like, this sort of thread in my head around why is it the way that it is? Why isn't it a different way? Who decided it was this way? And then particularly with businesses, sort of from a very early age, asking questions and sort of seeing things that I thought businesses could do that they weren't doing, and being curious about that. And so that started very young, and it was just a constant thread in my head. And by the time I got to be a late teenager, it was on full tilt boogie. I mean, I'd go for a walk, or I'd go for a drive or whatever, and I'd look at businesses and I go, well, why are they doing it that way? Or that's a dumb sign. Don't they understand? And so this category, what we today call category design, is not a thing that I think. It's a thing that thinks me. So the first set of ahas started when I started my first business. When I was 18, I got thrown out of school, and with a friend, I started a tech company. At the time, the personal computer was exploding. We didn't realize it, but we were doing category design. The aha was a simple aha, which was businesses were buying PCs and installing them, and they didn't really know how to use them. And so they needed help. And so we started a company doing training and custom programming and things along those lines for the very early stage personal computing category. And we saw a missing called the application of the technology inside of businesses. And we started a company to solve that missing. And we're in Montreal, Canada, we're among the first to do that. And within a very short period of time, we had extraordinary clients like Air Canada and Bank of Montreal and Royal Bank of Canada. And I was 18 and my partner was 19, and all of a sudden, poof, we emerged. And so from that point forward, Park, I just have really been obsessed with, okay, so what is it that has some companies achieve kind of radical exponential growth and change, and why is it most companies are stuck in a world of incremental asinine competition. And really, I've been obsessed with that for as long as I can remember. I wouldn't have articulated as clearly then as I do now, obviously, and the term category design came much earlier, and the sort of formalization of how you do radical differentiation and how you do exponential things, and how you effectively communicate to the world the power and the difference of the exponential future that you're trying to create. Those things sort of, the clarity around those things developed over time, but it really started very early for me.
As you know, I've been in this storytelling world now for nearly 2 decades, and I have scrambled all around from the hero's journey to Blake Snyder's 15 steps of story to my own story cycle system that really works in brand story development, but it's complicated. It takes me to walk people through it, to the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact, to really now my one thing where it all begins, as you know, because you and I talked about it about 6 months ago on your podcast, the ABT, the and, but, and therefore. And my mention to you about this, and this is for everybody out there, is, to me, it's that one thing. It is so simple, yet it has really defined the business of story for me. It's where the vast majority of my business is coming in now. It's where I believe all true, powerful business storytelling begins, is with this and, but, and therefore. But it's like counterintuitive to me. And I don't know if you've had this with your clients and even with yourself, Chris, that it feels like it's not complicated enough to be successful.
Yeah, well, we do have a need to get ourselves pretty confused, and the business world is confused about most things. The Wall Street Journal doesn't understand how business works. So if the Wall Street Journal doesn't understand how business works, then a lot of people are going to be in trouble as a result.
Well, can I do something here? Using your category design approach, can I read through a point of view that we did for a client about 3, 4 years ago in the solar industry, in the hugely commoditized solar industry, trying to find their niche using your approach? Can I read it to you and then get your honest to goodness feedback on how I did with this category design?
Of course, I'd love to.
Because, dude, this was taken literally right out of your book, Play Bigger. All right, so let me read through this. And I did, just like you said in your book too, when we presented this to the client, we did it one slide at a time. And we used the face of a plugin and used, different reactions as if that plug had a face to it as we read through this category design. And it goes like this: Americans spend 8% of their disposable income on all forms of energy. But there's hope in an energy revolution with rooftop solar installations up by 90% between 2010 and 2016. The cost of residential solar to consumers has decreased by 40% over the past 5 years and continues to decline. But utilities and their powerful lobbyists have dimmed the growth of the solar industry by repealing net metering and are obfuscating the future of regulations and rates, creating confusion and concern. To a utility, a customer is just a meter. Maybe that's why 89% of Americans favor the expanded use of solar to help address costs and environmental concerns. 41% of homeowners say that the primary reasons for choosing solar are the potential savings over time and protection against rate increases from their utility company. But the rooftop solar industry hasn't helped itself, with antiquated sales techniques, limiting choice, obscuring product quality information in solar quotes, and the lack of trustworthy installers. Until now. Introducing The People's Power by Arcadia Solar, the first whole home energy systems provider whose sole focus is to empower people, starting with its employees and sales representatives by ensuring they bring their optimum personal energy and expertise to every customer, enabling Arcadia Solar customers to monitor and manage their home's energy consumption real time for the greatest cost savings, equipping Americans to protect their homes and families by harnessing the free energy they're entitled to from the sun, moving from net metering to not metering. Arcadia Solar, power to the people.
It's great.
I got to tell you, Chris, I haven't read that live in probably 3 years. I wonder if I made that way too long.
Well, it's definitely very long.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily bad. I mean, that's not an ad you would run, and that's not
Right.
something you'd put on a homepage. And so I understand all that. The way I interpret that. So there's a difference between articulating a point of view and marketing a point of view. And so what I hear that is, Park, is sort of a short manifesto as opposed to a too long tagline. So,
Gotcha.
listen, everything goes back to Bill Clinton, of course. It depends on what your definition of is. And so if you were going to write a manifesto, if this company was going to be going public and you were going to be creating their S1, the documents that you publish, file with the SEC to go public, if you were going to create a white paper, if you were going to create a book about this, if they were going to write a book about the future of home, personal power at home, or whatever they were going to call the book, what you've laid out here is the strategic argument in a long form. And so that's at the category design level. From a marketing perspective, of course, you'd never have that long of a conversation with somebody unless they were sitting down to deeply get into it. You would distill that into 30 seconds, and that is distillable into 30 seconds. And so I think as a long form POV, which you can then start to innovate from for different executions in marketing, you have laid out the argument strategically. You framed the problem. You framed the problem for a certain type of individual. And as a result, and you're driving some clear photos from tubes, right? You speak of them as such. And so even upon first listening, when it's long, you go, okay, well, there's something here about the way solar is being done that's problematic and doesn't make sense. And these guys are presenting a potentially new and interesting point of view. And so I want to hear more about that, which is ultimately the objective of the stuff, regardless of how many of the data points or the specific pieces of the argument land. If at the end of it, somebody who is interested in potentially looking at home solar goes, there's something in there. Tell me more about that. Then you won.
And what we were trying to do there, we did with them, and it's actually led to quite nice growth for them, is create this activist brand around solar with that, of course, that old call to action, 60s call to action, power to the people. We are going to help you ferret through all these regulations that the bureaucracies want to confuse you with to keep you away from buying solar. We're going to put this energy monitoring into your house so that you can watch your energy use and have the power of dialing it back when you're out of there. And the idea is not just to bring you solar power, but to bring you power in that kind of activist brand approach for them.
I love it. And it's also something that tends to work, that ethos tends to work well in America, right? They're speaking to the independent streak and so forth and so on, being self-reliant and the like.
Well, now let's shift gears to you. So you've got this category design. And by the way, I love your pirate moniker on all you do social media. You have, of course, this book that I love, but you and your partners were going to write another book. Can you take our listeners through how you guys kind of blew up that idea of writing this book to now this position on Substack where you're absolutely killing it out there?
Thank you. So we decided, Eddie Yoon, who is the category guru to the global kind of 2,000 companies with a strong focus on the consumer side. He's written more for HBR than any living person or dead person for that matter on the subject of category creation, category design, and the like. And then my third partner is a guy named Nicholas Cole. And Cole, as he goes by, is the category king of how to make it as an online digital writer. He's 31 years old. He's been writing online professionally since he was 15. He's written the defining book on that called The Art and Science of Online Writing. And he and his partner in his education business, which is called Ship 30 for 30, run the number one how to write online sort of cohort-based training program on the internet today. So anyway, it's the three of us. And we got together a couple years ago and we wanted to write a book. And it was sort of an extension of Play Bigger for me. and an extension of Eddie's first book, which is an amazing book called Super Consumers, which we can talk about if you like, but they're really Super Consumers is one of the most powerful hiding in plain sight ideas in business. And so we wanted to take these ideas and Cole's experience writing with many of the top VCs, many of the top entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley for many, many years. So we want to take all that stuff together and look at category design through the lens of today and the future and everything that we've learned in the almost 6 years now since Play Bigger came out. So anyway, we started to work on that stuff, and we were going to do what most writers do, which is go write a book. And we had a lot of interest from traditional publishers, given our backgrounds, and we were in the beginning considering traditional publishing. I would never do that today, and we can talk about why if you like. And so we started to work on this book, and we got probably, I don't know, certainly more than halfway there, probably closer to 2/3 done. And as we were working on it, the work, I just thought it was fucking great. I was so proud of what we were doing. And I know this is going to sound like I have lived on the left coast for too long, but the three of us are always in flow, and we've never not been in flow. I mean, it has been the most bizarrely amazing creative partnership, certainly of on an ongoing basis that I've had. And so we just got into this incredible flow. We started doing primary research. We started writing and talking about things that none of us had ever written about before, kind of real deep secrets and approaches. Anyway, long story longer, Park, me being a child, I just couldn't hold on to it. I was like, I can't wait another year and a half to write this, deliver it to a publisher, wait 9 months, 6 months, a year for this thing to come out. And I wanted to share it now. I was like a kid on Christmas. So we said, hey, wait a minute. What if we start a newsletter and have an ongoing conversation? And then we had an aha, which is, well, there's this ethos in the tech industry today called build in public. And one of the things that Cole specializes in is helping writers write in public. So his program, Ship 30 for 30, is all about teaching people how to, quote unquote, develop a daily digital writing habit. And the reason it's called Ship 30 for 30 is you're going to ship something, that is to say, publish something online every day for 30 straight days, because you don't have a breakthrough in something by not doing it. So we said, okay, well, let's start writing a newsletter. And if we do that and we do it well, maybe we can achieve a few things, which is, number one, learn what our shared audiences are most interested in. Two, learn where we think we can take them in terms of stretching our thinking and their thinking. Get real insight into what lands and what doesn't land. Immediately share business-altering research. So, for example, one of the things that we did was we did a deep data science research project where we analyzed the fastest growing companies. And we looked at who were category creators and who weren't, to figure out how much more value the category creators were getting than the non-category creators. And we discovered it was about 3 times more value. And I can walk you through that if it matters. Anyway, we started to put all this stuff together. And then as we were releasing it, the aha was, you know what we're doing? We're writing the book in public. So rather than work in silent for a year or whatever it is, and then do a big ta-da, we were essentially creating chapters or mini or parts of chapters as a newsletter. And we essentially wrote the book we were writing as a newsletter first. Well, that allowed for several things. Number one, it allowed the audience who most cares about this work of category design to get access to our freshest, newest thinking immediately. They didn't have to wait for 2 years or a year and a half or whatever. Number two, it allowed us to pioneer a model that today is called the direct to creator model. And I think it is the most exciting thing happening in the creator world. If you say creator is anybody who creates anything of valuable in the digital world, now we don't need intermediaries. We don't need a publishing company. We don't need business media companies. If you look at, Inc., Fast Company, Forbes, Fortune, all these things, nobody reads that shit anymore. We used to write for those people. Nobody reads that shit anymore. It's a complete, as a matter of fact, we would not write for any of those publications again. All those sort of tier 3 type business publications are garbage. Nobody reads them anymore. and so forth. And so the direct-to-creator model means that you and I as consumers of business media, you and I as consumers of thinking, of new ideas, you and I as learners, we can find who are the smartest people in the world about the topics that we care about, and we can go direct to those people. And so we wanted to have a direct relationship with people who care about these topics, other pirates who reject the premise and want to learn to create a different future and create new categories and move the world forward. We wanted to be part of that tribe, and we wanted to have an ongoing conversation. So a newsletter, in our case, a paid newsletter, allowed us to do that. And then we got to a certain point where we thought, our book is ready to go. And so we published 2 what we call big books towards the end of 2021, which was roughly about 10 months after we had started Category Pirates as a Substack. And we launched what we called the Category Design Toolkit, which is sort of the book we were writing anyway. But it had so much other content over the year of writing Category Pirates as mini book newsletters that we had a second book called The Marketer's Guide to Category Design. And they sort of fit nicely together. And they were mostly a collection of what was in the newsletter. And they represented a great step forward from the original work of Play Bigger. And so here was the net effect. We have a much more profound and impactful relationship than I think we ever would have had we done traditional publishing. We got to participate and do get to participate in an ongoing conversation around these topics that matter to people, particularly our super consumers, that is to say, the people who are raving fans of the idea of category design and want to continuously play with what we call the category lens. And then from a business perspective, here's the aha. Instead of getting paid an advance for our book, which given our track record we would have gotten, we got paid the advance for our book by our customers, our consumers, our readers, our fans. So we made more in a year from our Substack than we would have from a very generous advance off the book. The other thing for writers in particular, the book industry, in particular the business book industry, has sold us a bunch of bullshit. And that bullshit goes like this. Oh, there's no money in business books. There's no money. It's your business book is your business card. It's a great brochure, and it gives you a word I can't stand. It gives you credibility. And so when you establish your credibility, you write a book, and we'll pay you a real shitty advance. We'll own 90% of your intellectual property. You can't decide how it's priced. You can't ever put it on sale. You can't ever do a special. You can't do any of that shit. We control all of that shit. And oh, by the way, you got to write it. And you got to do all the marketing anyway. And we're in exchange for this piddly advance, we're going to take most of the economics. And because you can't make money anyway. And what you really want is a great brochure, a great website. That is complete, total bullshit. And we proved it because in 9 months, Category Pirates broke the top 10 paid business newsletters on Substack. And before we were a year old, we hit number 5 on the paid business charts, which puts us in the 0.5% of paid business newsletters on planet Earth in less than a year. We made a lot more money than we would have made with a generous advance. We developed a deep, meaningful relationship with our most powerful consumers. And then guess what? When we went to go launch the book, the 2 big books, we had a built-in audience. And even though we made it clear to everybody that if you subscribe to Category Pirates, the newsletter, you have the content in these books, a meaningful percentage of our subscribers bought them anyway, because they either wanted the analog book, they wanted to gift it, or what have you. The other thing about this business model, this direct-to-creator business model, if it's digital first, which in our case it is, here's the other cool thing. It's a 97% margin business. And when you have a 97% margin business, you've built in, at least in our case, radical generosity into your business model. So, for example, here's something that we could have never done with a traditional publisher. And I don't know how often this has been done before. I haven't seen it before. It might have been done before, but I haven't seen it. Here's what we decided to do, Park. As we were getting ready to launch Category Design Toolkit and Marketer's Guide to Category Design, we started promoting to our world via all of our communication channels, all the normal ones you'd expect, that if you wanted Category Design Toolkit for free, we would give it to you. So for the week before it went live on Amazon, it's a $30 book for an analog book, and I think it's $20 for the Kindle version. We said, go to this website, give us your email address, and we will send you a PDF of the whole thing free. Not the introduction, not the foreword, not the first 3 chapters, not any of that. The entire fucking thing for free. And we got many, many, many thousands of people who took us up on that offer. And it's hard to have sort of quantifiable data. Our gut says approximately a quarter of them, 25%, probably bought it anyway. But here's what we do know happened. For the first 2 months those books were out, they were number one every day. Category Design Toolkit was number one for over 2 months. Marketer's Guide to Category Design was about a month and a half or so in multiple different categories. So look, here's what I know. Now is the greatest time in history to be a creator. Now is the greatest time in history to be a writer. And part of that is the power of the direct-to-creator model that has emerged on the internet. And with platforms like Gumroad and Substack and OnlyFans and now many others, they understand that these are platforms for creators to build businesses on top of. Amazon itself, right? We self-publish on Amazon. I could tell you categorically, Park, that if somebody offered us $1 million advance for the next Category Pirates book, which will be coming out this June, July, we wouldn't accept it, not even close. And so what we're building is a powerful direct relationship with the people who care the most about how to design and dominate a different future. And we're building a great business doing it. And we have this direct relationship. And if they want to buy our work as an ongoing subscription on Substack, excellent. If they want to buy our book, or if they want to buy our work as analog or digital books or audio books on Amazon, excellent. And so we've developed this model that is direct and has flexibility and choice for our consumers and fans. And fucking A, it worked, because in less than a year, we broke the top 10 or now are in the top 5. And, we've had a hell of a run on Amazon since we launched the big books. And we're going to keep doing that. So our guess is we will launch 2 to 4 big books a year that will have been essentially pre-written as newsletters. And that's how we're going to keep doing it. And we're very excited about it. And we're trying to encourage as many other creators to adopt this direct-to-creator model and to not buy into the myth from the legacy media companies that we need them. We don't fucking need them.
All right. You make my job extraordinarily easy because you articulated that so well. So I want to go to a lightning round. And here it is. You've done this extraordinarily well with your 2 pirates there. It feels like you're a bit of a unicorn. Can everybody have the success you guys have? So let me unpack with a couple questions and fire them right at you that I think maybe these are some of the questions in my listeners' head. Number 1, the beautiful thing about your books and the Substack newsletter is you guys have a tone of voice that is uniquely your own, is very fun to read, and you just get something out of everything. You had said earlier that you guys just magically find the flow and are always in the flow, which is like almost impossible to find. How can you do that, or how can other people replicate what you're doing if they are not just writing by themselves, but writing with partners, to find that tone of voice and to be able to put out as much good content as you do?
First of all, the architecture of our partnership is kind of where it starts. The 3 of us are on a mission together. My sincere and committed intention is to write with Cole and Eddie until you put me in a box and throw dirt on my face. So these gentlemen are brothers in arms. We care about entrepreneurship. We care about legendary breakthrough products being able to make their place in the world. We care about creating abundance as opposed to fighting over scarcity. We care about the people who want to make exponential change in the world and drive new value. And we think that a lot of the traditional thinking about business is completely wrong. Most of what we learn about entrepreneurship and business, we would argue 90% of it is wrong, and we can talk about why. So there is a shared mission around trying to inspire people to become category designers. That is to say, people to proactively make a decision that what they're going to do is break and take new ground and teach the world to move from an old way to a new way. And when they do that successfully, they will achieve professional success in a way that they could never have imagined before. Much like what you said right off the top. You have been studying this domain for decades. And when you were able to lock it all in and hang your hat on a category called the business of story, all of a sudden you became known for a category that you owned. And this is the big aha. Categories make the brand, not the other way around, right? There's a reason nobody drinks Red Bull Cola, because in spite of the power of their brand, they went head on against the category king and got crushed. If you were just generically trying to be the guru of business writing, well, there's a million people trying to do that. You differentiated on story, and you evangelized the power of this idea, this what we would call point of view, to create a category of the business of story. And if enough people agree with your unique and different point of view and see it as an exponential step forward that solves a valuable problem, then all of a sudden they give a shit who Park is and what you're teaching about. And what was that ABT thing I think you heard you said? But you have to sort of get over a hump called, well, wait a minute. First and foremost, every legendary company is a story. And if you can't tell a legendary story, you're not going to have a legendary company. And I, Park, am the person to teach you how to build a story brand. Well, that's a unique and powerful point of view in the
That's
business
Donald
world.
Miller, story brand. Let's a branded story.
There you go.
Just to clarify that.
And so that's the aha, right? And so we have a shared commitment. We are missionaries on that path. And we know our work is not a mainstream work. There's about 60 or 70 million people on LinkedIn who have marketing or entrepreneurship in their title. And we know that a very small percentage of them will ever even be willing to consider that categories are things that you can design and create. And that's okay. We're looking for we're on a mission to speak to a very small percentage of people who are likely ever going to get this.
You're looking for pirates.
That's right. We don't wake up every day wondering, why Oprah hasn't called to talk to us yet.
Next question. So you've got three of you cranking out content. Do each of you take on your own article, write it, bounce it off of each other, and then publish it? Are you writing them together? How do you make those three cats work together?
Such a great question. So get back to the architecture. Number one, we are a three-way equal partnership. From a creative perspective and from an economic perspective, everything's equal. That's point A. Point B, we have a radical design. So Category Pirates is a company, Category Pirates LLC. And when we explained this to the lawyer drafting the documents, he literally said in a 30-year career, he'd never heard this before. One of the design points of our agreement goes like this. Each of the individual pirates owns 100% all IP created by Category Pirates, and he can do anything he wants with it outside of Category Pirates if he chooses. And if he were to leave, he would be able to use everything that the group has done up until that point in any way he sees fit. Now, we had to have two discussions with the lawyer for him to even wrap his head around this thing, because he's like, well, part of what LLC agreements do is protect the IP for the LLC. We're like, listen, by designing that in, what that means is none of us are ever going to have an idea and go, maybe I should keep that one for myself. We feel fully free to contribute. So that's another incredibly important design point. We have interests outside of Category Pirates. We love and support each other on those things. We also, and here's another really important one, in every organization, even a 3-person organization, there needs to be a decider. And in the writing domain, as you know, you could polish that stuff forever. So there's one person who decides when we hit publish, and that person is Nicholas Cole. And he also decides if and when he needs another round of eyes on it from Eddie and I. So Cole, as the professional writer, and look, Eddie and I have written a fair amount in our lives too, but we're not confused. Cole's the writer. Cole is the master sensei writer. So as a result, he decides. He decides what's in the final, and he decides when to hit publish. Okay, so those architecture things are very important. Now, in terms of how we do the work, every Friday morning, we have a 2 to 3 hour jam session over Zoom. And I can tell you, it is, in my professional life, the time of the week I look the most forward to. The way we think about writing together, Park, is the way a band works together. So we have a coach. His name is Phil Toole, the legendary Phil Toole. And he's best known for being the man who, quote unquote, saved Metallica. Metallica did a documentary years ago about how they almost broke up and how Phil helped them come together. It's called Some Kind of Monster. And in there, Phil helps them put aside their differences, realize how amazing they are together, and they come together, and they've been a unit ever since. And Kurt Hammett, the lead guitar player, says that if John and Paul had had Phil, the Beatles never would have broken up. So we have Phil come in and work with us as a coach from time to time, because in part, our mindset is to create content, create words, like Metallica creates music. And so that Friday morning when we do that jam session, we show up and one of us has a beat and one of us has a riff and one of us has a lyric, and we start kicking them around, and we start jamming on them just like a band would. If somebody started off with a beat and then somebody else added the bass and somebody else started to lick and somebody else started humming on top of it, and you started playing with it, and so forth and so on. And somebody goes, "Hey, wait a minute, that was really fucking great what you just said." And before you know it, within typically 20 minutes or so, the idea for the next several letters starts to emerge. And because we do this on an ongoing basis every week, we're always working on multiple letters kind of in tandem. Then we focus in on the one that typically is the closest to production. And we really bang through the ideas on that, and we jam on it and ask questions and so forth and so on. So we get a good sort of high level set of ideas out there. And Cole is a master at synthesizing all this stuff, and he adds his incredible insight on top of it. So then we go away. And Cole is always responsible for the first draft. We use Google Docs because it's a great, simple platform for three people writing a document together. When Eddie and I jump into the document, we use the suggesting feature, not the editing feature, because Cole decides. Sometimes Eddie and I will write an entire section about something we feel is really important, and it doesn't get into the letter. Right? Sometimes we do some primary research. Eddie is incredible at this, and because of his background in management consulting and so forth and so on, sometimes we'll be doing an ongoing research project, which will then get feathered into a letter. So he'll bring some research. Sometimes we'll go get third-party research where appropriate. But anyway, Cole writes the first version. We jump in as soon as he says he's ready. We come in suggesting, and we start to add stuff. I would say 7 or 8 times out of 10, there's an iterative process that takes place. It gets completed, and then Cole presses publish. And the exciting thing for Eddie and I is we don't know what the final product's going to look like until it ends up in our inbox. I love to see what he decided goes in and what doesn't. From time to time, Cole will text us and say, "Hey, there's a thing in here I want to talk about." And either the three of us will talk again, or more than likely, he'll talk to us individually. From time to time, one of us will read the first draft and go, something's not right. The emphasis is on the wrong syllable. And then we'll get on and we'll jam about it. And then there'll be a huge breakthrough in clarity and go, fuck, we were actually writing 3 letters there, first principles. Let's shave this doggy down. And so those are the kinds of things that we do as we work on the process. In terms of the voice, Category Pirates is not an individual voice. It is the voice of a band. And if you listen to great bands, Metallica being an extraordinary example. Even if you're not a fan of their music, you must admire their songwriting and their musicianship. And they sound like one thing. They don't sound like a group of things. And so we have consciously cultivated that voice. And we push and pull the voice. And as we push and pull the voice, Cole sort of decides where that voice lands. And then in terms of making it super readable, we want to write it almost like it's a mystery novel. So there's a whole bunch of writing techniques, and we can talk about them if you like, that we employ to write with courage. To I'll give you, if you like, we published a newsletter a while ago called How to Write a Top 1% Business Newsletter, and we have sort of 7 key things that I can walk you through if you care.
Yeah, let's do that. In fact, I was in Vegas last week and pulled that up and read through it. And yeah, could we hit quickly on all 7 of those? Because I thought they were really powerful.
Thank you. So number 1, have a radically different point of view. So if it's already been written 10,000 times, why the fuck are you writing it? So have a radically different point of view. And we believe one of the biggest problems in business media today is, with few exceptions, if you take a post from Forbes, Fortune, Fast Company, Inc., Entrepreneur, etc., and change the masthead on it, you wouldn't know. Stink Magazine has no voice. Why? Because they all have, quote unquote, contributed articles from a sea of people who think that writing for free, or in the case of some of them paying to write and being called a blah, blah, blah member of some, wanker society or something, adds prestige to your LinkedIn. That's not what this is about. Anything that appears in Inc. or Forbes or Fortune is nothing you should be writing. Have a radically different point of view. Number 2, bring fresh data, frameworks, and insights. If you're not willing to do primary research, if you're not willing to connect the dots amongst other big ideas and other people's research with your point of view and potentially your own research and frameworks, then you're not bringing anything fresh. And so don't write shit that, if Inc. magazine would publish it, you shouldn't write it, because it's been written a billion times. Right? We've all read the same stupidities. Half of the most important thing in business. Let's talk about how you get everyone. Let's talk about why you should, 7 things that Elon Musk does before breakfast, and you should too. Like, there's so much fucking asinine stupidity. Nobody wants to hear any of that anymore. So radically different point of view, fresh data, frameworks, and insights. Number 3,
To be real clear, Christopher, you guys point out in that article that you don't do your own research, primary research, that you are often out there digging up, looking at other people's research, because research is timely, time consuming, costly, but you bring a different point of view to the research findings, or you find research to back up a point of view. Is that right?
We do both. We do our own, because a lot of the things that we care about, there is no research for. So if we can't find if there's an area that we think needs to be researched and there is no research, we go get it. And if it's there, we'll happily use it and credit the source. And sometimes we'll do a mix of both. The point being, however, we are not going to say things that you've heard 3 times somewhere else or 10 times somewhere else, because there's no point in writing it. And we decided very early on, we're having a very high IQ, big brain conversation. So we're not going to succumb to all these stupid listicles, and we're not going to do all this idiot hustle porn star garbage. And, you don't see us posting memes, quoting ourselves with photos of ourselves and all that other inane shit. We're for people who want to get into it. Our average mini book newsletter is probably around 6,000 or 7,000 words. And so people tell us they sit down on the Sunday with a coffee or a beer or a glass of wine, and they get into it, right? And if you're that kind of person, you're going to love what we do. If you want a bunch of listicles and videos with people with cat ears on their heads, not so much. But the thing about the point of view and the data and the frameworks and insights, we never come to a conclusion about something without telling the reader how we got there. We don't just make a statement. We bring you into our thinking. One of our sort of mantras is, thinking about thinking is the most important kind of thinking. And so We want to help people think about thinking. And when we're presenting thinking, we present you with the thinking that got us to the thinking, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing is write with courage. Most people write to be liked. We write to make a difference. And understanding the delta between writing to be liked, writing to achieve some popularity contest, or how many shares did I think? All of that. Some of those metrics are interesting and some of those metrics are important, but for the most part, we don't really give a shit, right? We want to write with courage. We are willing to say things that most people are not willing to say. We are willing to say with proof and data why what most people do in branding is absolutely asinine. We just wrote one called The Big Product Lie. And we talked about all the myths that we're told about why the best product wins and why these product strategies are the right strategies. And that newsletter caused it was one of our highest unsubscribes and our highest new subscribes. And my favorite was this guy who unsubscribed the day the Big Product Lie came out said, and he put it so politely, he's like, I'm not sure I agree with the editorial direction, best wishes or something. Right?
Perfect. You hit home.
Exactly. And so if you're not writing with courage, why are you writing?
One of the point of views I thought was interesting of yours is you guys took on Gary Vaynerchuk's approach, his all F-bomb brashness, get out there and out hustle everybody else. And you actually called it, I think, Gary VD.
Yes.
And I literally laughed out loud at the Marriott lobby having my coffee last week in Vegas when I read that bit.
Well, and here's the thing about that. And look, I hope Gary's a happy guy. But the reality is hustle porn stars have done more to hurt entrepreneurs in the last decade or so than any one group of people. And here's the net. One, hustle all the time is insane. It'll get you fat. It'll get you sick. It'll get you dead. It'll get you divorced. Idiots like him and Grant Cardone have said that hustle is the most important word in the English language, and nobody's ever died of working too hard. Well, in Japan, they have a word for it. It's called karoshi. It roughly translates to death by work or work by death or death by work, I guess. And so that's bullshit. And so teaching young people these things is ridiculous. Yes, if you as an entrepreneur or anybody who's committed to doing anything needs to be told you're going to have to work hard, then you're not an entrepreneur and you're not somebody that's going to do anything exponential anyway. It's ridiculous. That's point A. Point B, the thing that's maybe even or equally as insidious is what most people don't understand about influencers is the way they make money is by monetizing an envy gap. So the influencer has to put himself or herself above the audience, speak down to them, and essentially their sales pitch is, don't you wish you were me? And the more of an envy delta, an envy gap they can create, the more attention they get. These people look, Gary Vee says it, I'm in the attention business. Anybody in the attention business hasn't evolved beyond being fucking 3. Because winning in business and life is not about winning the attention business. And so these people create this envy gap. They put themselves above. I'm the person with the tablets. I'm the leader. You're the follower. And you buy my shit so that you can be like me. This is the Kardashians. And this is Gary Vee, and this is John Lee Dumas, and this is Grant Cardone, and this is all of these sort of business hustle porn buffoons. But the horrible thing they're doing is, and this is why we call personal branding the me disease, and you get the me disease when you experience Gary VD, is you think that the pathway to success is barking stupidities into your phone going, hey guys, it's me. I'm at the airport. And you actually are arrogant enough to think the world cares about you. And if you can get the world to wish they were you, they'll buy your shit. And therefore you want to create and monetize an envy gap. And there's no legendary entrepreneur or creator in the world that ever was purposely putting themselves above others and creating and monetizing envy.
Wow, I'm glad we went down that rabbit hole. Thank you for that because
You're
it was the Me Disease one that I was reading. And then you also had mentioned it in another article, and it literally made me laugh out loud. So, number one, radically different point of view, bring fresh data, frameworks, insights, connect the dots for people. Three, write with courage. What's number four?
Don't be a curator of recycled stupidities.
Well, yeah, the thing about you, Chris, is the mincing of the words is just so unclear for my listeners. Can you be more specific?
I've been taking a self-expression class lately so that I can come out of my shell.
I've got Dr. Randy Olson, who helped me with the ABT, and I call him my sensitivity coach
Yeah.
because he is anything but sensitive about everything.
Well, and this is another stupidity that's emerged in social media, which is, hey, you don't have to write anything. Just you be a curator of great shit. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for that. If you read something really interesting, or, of course. And a big part of our work, a big part of what I certainly try to do on the podcast, we certainly try to do it with Category Pirates, we try to do it with Play Bigger, is stand on the shoulder of giants. And you can't be an extraordinary teacher unless you're an extraordinary learner first. And so I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is this stupidity that says, hey, don't worry, you don't have to have anything to say. Just every time you see something you think smart, just fucking recycle that. And so the internet is just full of all these inane memes that so that is no way to do this. So that's number four. Number five, that sort of sits next to that, is don't write inane garbage with the intention of clickbaiting people. We are not in the attention business. We're in the make a difference business. And so this pursuit of clickbait is way more insidious than we think. I'll give you two examples. We live at a time where never before have people been rewarded for ever increasing outrageous behavior. And that's why you see a lot of what you see today in social media and in the digital world. Do you know who Scott Galloway is, by chance, Professor Scott Galloway?
I know the name, but I'm not familiar with the work.
He's a business guru guy. And, he came on my podcast. He's relatively well known and so forth and so on. I thought he was an interesting guy. As his digital career began to ascend, he was known for making outrageous statements. He was known for being, over the top outrageous, and he sort of wrapped it in this sort of pseudo intellectualism as a university professor. Anyway, long story longer, this guy gets a deal to do a TV show with Bloomberg. And to do that TV show with Bloomberg, he shoots a video of himself shirtless, wearing jeans and a bunch of like a construction hat and a tool belt and stuff. And he does this very bizarre rap video and talking about his.
Like a modern day village person?
Yeah,
I mean, is that what he was
like
going for here?
part of the village people, exactly. And he's
Yeah.
rapping about his sexuality and it truly, when you see it, you go, wow, like he needs medical attention, like something happened to him. And of course, he immediately lost the gig with Bloomberg, and the whole thing blew up. And I think he's now gone on to do something else. I'm not exactly sure, so maybe he's recovered from it. But the point being, here's a guy who's a university professor who appeared to be trying to have a thoughtful conversation, and just got more and more outrageous over time, and has essentially turned himself into a joke. And we see that happening over and over and over again in this desperate attention situation. And so people look for clickbait. Here's another example. I know for a fact right now, Inc. magazine is doing a massive story about a murdered entrepreneur. These guys are supposed to be the champion of entrepreneurship. Why the fuck would a business magazine be doing a TMZ style article about an entrepreneur who was brutally murdered? Nobody wants to read that shit in a business magazine. They are so desperate at Inc. magazine because they're a dying breed. All of those guys are dying because the direct-to-creator model is crushing them, because people realize they don't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that Forbes's logo is on the thing. That's no. As a matter of fact, Forbes takes content that people pay them to write for them and charge us to read. It's fucking insane. And so all of them have adopted this asinine model, and they're so desperate for clickbait, they have sunk to the level of Gawker. So I guess my point in this is, if you want to build a legendary career as a writer, or really as anything, this idea of recycled stupidities and anything for clickbait attention, that's a disease. And it's widespread. Yeah.
Number 6.
Number 6, don't confuse length with value. So there's some people who are very good. The Naval podcast comes to mind. I don't know what his average podcast is. It may be 5 minutes. And there's a lot of people who think he's a very deep thinker and really like him. And whether you like him or not, he's got a big audience. He's a provocative guy. And he's very good at short. And he's not stupid, right? So he's not, he's talking about things that are substantive. The flip side of that is Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. Well, everybody in the podcast world says, oh, you got to drop an episode a week or 5 episodes a week or whatever the current stupidity of the day is in terms of podcast advice. Well, Dan Carlin, Hardcore History, there are years where he does 1, maybe 2 episodes. And I haven't looked recently, but I think he still has the most popular history podcast on the planet. So go for value around a radically different point of view and a unique voice. And don't listen to any idiot who tells you it needs to be this, it needs to be that in terms of length. We were told, Park, when we started Category Pirates, nobody pays for business content anymore. Completely wrong. Nobody's going to pay for a business newsletter. Completely wrong. Nobody's gonna pay for and read a 7,000 word business newsletter that comes out every other week or whatever. Well, we write long. And there's an interesting thing. If I showed you the graph of our growth, so we started in January and we were growing very well. And then by about right around July 4th, we never talked about it. We just, when our voice really locked in and we really sort of, our flow got to a whole other level, so to speak, we went from 3,000 or 4,000 words a newsletter to 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000. We've done a couple 12, I think. And we did that around July. And then for whatever reason after that, our letters were longer. So our curve was nicely going up and to the right. And then all of a sudden, once we went longer, it went straight up. And it sort of hasn't stopped since then. Yeah, I mean, it does. It rolls on the way up. It's not up every single day. But my point is this: there was a meaningful. We had great growth off the top, and then there was a meaningful demarcation point when we went longer. And so, don't confuse length with value. Write what there is to say. Create what there is to create. Don't listen to anybody. And if what there is to create is 8,000 words, then create 8,000 words. And if what there is to create is a really legendary meme that catches people's attention, then create that. But there are no rules in this. And anybody who tells you that you should this or that, or there's a formula, or I know you need to drop every Wednesday at 4:17 West Coast time, because that's the time. Our last newsletter, we dropped it on a Friday afternoon at about 4:00 West Coast time. And one of our readers sent us a note and said, wow, there's nothing more piratey than having the balls to drop a 7,000 word newsletter on a Friday afternoon. And we said, look, we don't care about Friday afternoon. We're writing forever. We want this to be timeless, legendary work. And whether it comes out on a Friday or it comes out when it's ready.
Early in my career, I produced a whole ton of corporate videos. And I always was amazed. I didn't know any better. I thought there must have been some reason for this instruction. But I come in, Park, can you come over and see us today? We need to do a 10-minute video. Park, we need to do a 15-minute video. And I was always baffled at like, why are you leading with length? Shouldn't this really be about content? Maybe that 10-minute video needs to be 2 minutes, or maybe it needs to be 20 minutes. I don't know, but what is it, we're trying to say? And then lately, Chris, I've been on a number of podcasts of people that are helping to produce podcasts and put them on air, only to find out it's really kind of a sales thing. They have me on the show, and the whole thing with reciprocity, then the next email I get is, hey, we're ready to produce business story for you. But they asked me too, they go, well, we've noticed you've got 350 plus episodes. Not one of them is under 30 minutes. In fact, not one of them is under 40 minutes. We've always been told, 20 minutes tops because nobody has that attention span. And Chris, this show right here, you're breaking everything because I have tried to wean it back to 40 minutes, but it comes down to content. And if the content is good and the guest is good, then why can't it be 2, 3, and 4 hours? And I mean, you are breaking my model for the last year because we are well over an hour here because the content is so freaking good.
Well, thank you. And of course, I agree completely. We live at a time where what passes for thinking is the mental retweeting of things we like. And most people don't stop and say, listen to the words, right? So the last point on our 7 things to think about for writing a legendary newsletter is reject the premise. And this is a category design principle. And essentially what it means is whenever we're engaging in thinking, we start by rejecting the premise. So we say, okay, well, what does everybody think about this thing? Whatever it is, whatever the thing is, whatever common wisdom is, if we say, well, we want to think about this thing. We start off by rejecting the premise. Well, that's bullshit. I don't accept the way that it is. And pick the premise apart. And then there's a technique in thinking that says, ask why 5 to 7 times. And if you're willing to ask yourself these things, and you say, I'll give you one that's one of our favorites. It's in the big product line. There's this thing in the technology startup world called product market fit. You want to, quote, achieve product market fit. And if you achieve product market fit, you've really done something. Okay, well, as a writer, the most important thing is to pay attention to the words. Listen to the words. Product market fit. Well, if you start by listening to the words and then rejecting the premise, did anybody legendary who created something new that made a giant difference, was their approach, was their mental framework, I'm trying to fit my product into a market? Was that what Henry Ford was doing? Is that what Picasso did? Is that what Sarah Blakely did? No, they didn't do that at all. And so product market fit has tricked more entrepreneurs into thinking what their job is to fit their product into an existing market category. And if enough people say, oh yeah, that's great, and buy it, you've won. When in reality, all of the legends did not fit. They made a place. They didn't fit into a place. And it was as a result of making a different place as opposed to fitting into an existing place that they became legendarily successful. And yet the startup ecosystem has accepted this term, product market fit, and they never think about it. So if you want to be a legendary thinker and therefore write a legendary newsletter or anything else that's legendary for that matter, reject the premise. Now, if after asking why 5 to 7 times, and if after looking at how this conclusion around this particular idea, in this case, product market fit, you then come to a conclusion that you accept the premise, well, that's fair enough. But the only way you can test your own thinking and the thinking of others is to start by rejecting the premise. And at least in our case, when we reject the premise and look at an idea like product market fit, and we ask 5 to 7 whys, within 3 whys, you get to, this is fucking stupid and damaging. And yet there are books written about this stuff.
Can you give us an example of your whys? Like what's the first why you begin with when you start challenging and or rejecting a premise?
Okay, so tell me something you believe.
Well, I used to believe
Well, tell me something you
that
believe
the
now.
hero's journey. What's
Tell
that?
me something you
Oh,
believe now.
okay, great. All right. Well, let's attack the premise of the and button. Therefore, I do believe that this is the starting point for all powerful communication if you want to be a storyteller.
Okay, great. Why do you believe the ABT is the most powerful starting point for being a storyteller?
Because I backed into it from all the complexity of the hero's journey and the 15 steps this and the 9 steps that. And I tried to teach that stuff for a decade only to see it just bouncing off people's heads in the audience. And I was realizing they're not getting this and or they don't care. They don't want to be story theorists. They want just the most basic thing that they can use to make them become a more powerful communicator.
And why did you learn that after 10 years of digging into that work?
It took me that long. I guess I'm dense. I'm a little bit slow. It was going from the complexity of everything that I was learning, applying it, that I too kept trying to find easier ways to communicate it and actually easier ways to activate it in people's lives and including my own life.
And why did you come to the conclusion that that was a demarcation point for you and for others?
Because I started doing the research and finding the ABT throughout history, literally working alongside Dr. Randy Olson, who was the one that introduced me to it when I was looking at it from an evolutionary standpoint. And I'm looking at it in communications from a political standpoint and branding and marketing. To me, there was a truth in this that it's about those three forces of story: agreement to get your audience leaning in, contradiction to pique their interest on, okay, so what's the resolution? And then, of course, the resolution or the consequence of that that brings it full circle. To me, it made sense. And when I started seeing its ubiquity in communication across time, it was like it became a no brainer to me.
And why did you choose the ABT framework as opposed to, there are other mental frameworks for how to write compelling things and how to write compelling story?
It's the one that hit me, I assume, at the right time back in 2013 when I was really digging into all this stuff. And Chris, there was just something about all of my work over the years in branding, taking a complex branding message and trying to make it simple and failing a lot at that, but then having some success and reading lots of people on it, that when I saw the ABT, it was an aha moment for me. It's like, oh, this is it. This is what I've been looking for.
And as you see what we're doing here, I could ask you why a whole bunch more times and we'd still have more to talk about. So the aha for me is we start by rejecting the premise, but we do it in this case politely. This is something you believe in deeply. So I'm not rejecting it like, oh, F you. I'm coming from a curiosity perspective. Most people think the purpose of a conversation or a dialogue is to win. If you ultimately surrender your position and adopt mine, that's when I had a great conversation and vice versa. And so what most people call dialogue is actually called waiting to talk. And what most people are waiting to talk about is their opinion, and their purpose in sharing their opinion is to get you to agree. That is a fundamentally fucked up paradigm framework for conversation, and it is a deeply flawed one for thinking. The more powerful one is a curiosity one, is a why one. Why do you believe that? Why is that important to you? How did you learn that? Why did you come to that conclusion? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if I move aside my own personal opinion and I reject my own premise, maybe I even start with rejecting your premise. I reject all of it and just stand in a place of pure curiosity. As pure, look, we all have our biases, of course we do, but as pure as you can get yourself to be and say, okay, well, why does this guy bet his whole fucking career on this thing called ABT? And is he super smart? Is he super stupid? Can he? Most people cannot. Try this with a political topic. Pick anything you want: guns, climate, voting rights, whatever. Any of the
How about vaccines?
vaccines. Perfect. Ask anybody about vaccines. They have an opinion. Ask them why 3 times. Most people can't get past 2 times because they're retweeting someone else's thinking. They haven't actually done the thinking. And look, on certain topics, that's fine. But on topics of consequence, like the vaccine, for example, you need to be able to answer why 7 times, 5 to 7 times. Because your health and the health of your family and the health of your community is at stake. Or maybe you don't think it's at stake and it's a pandemic. And maybe you think that Bill Gates has a Bigfoot farm where he's trained the Bigfoots to install the misters on the 5G towers to infect everybody with the disease so that we can give them the shot so that we all have chips in them. Maybe that's what you think. Okay, well, why do you think that? And then whatever the person says, you say, okay, well, why do you think that? And normally by the third or fourth why, most people who don't think about thinking, which is most people, can't get past it. They can't get past a headline that they like. And so, look, that's fine in your personal life if you just want to have opinions that feel good that you don't think about. Everybody's, in a free country, you have the right to not think about things deeply. You do, and most people don't. As it relates to business, marketing, your own personal career, building legendary companies and categories, it behooves you to have a big, deep conversation around thinking about thinking. Well, why do you think what you think about your market opportunity? Why do you think what you think about what are the mega trends going forward that are to your advantage? What are the tailwinds? What are the headwinds? What are your assumptions about competition? What are your assumptions about technology? Have you considered the fact that more than half of the people in America are now native digitals, and that native digitals respond completely differently to native analogs? Have you considered that in terms of your company, your product, and your category design, and how you're going to drive growth going forward? Have you given that some serious thoughts? The biggest demographic shift in the history of human beings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't stop and think these things, then you will be a victim of people who do and did. It's that simple.
What, Chris, did you learn from your whying of me around the ABT?
So you gave me a gift with the ABT because, and you and I have talked about this before on both of our podcasts, in category design, we have this thing called a POV, a point of view. And it is simply structured very similarly to that of the ABT, which is essentially, and this is such a profound insight, it sounds like it's nothing, just like the ABT. It's so simple, you can't imagine how profound it is. But it goes like, in a point of view, it goes like this. Nobody buys a solution until they have a fucking problem. And so a point of view starts with articulating, framing, naming, and claiming a problem. And it could be an opportunity, so it doesn't have to be a negative always, but it's an insight. It's an aha. It's to quote the Big Lebowski, it's this aggression will not stand, man. It is what you could think of as a different future. Legendary creators, entrepreneurs, and marketers become obsessed. They become missionaries with creating a different future. One of my favorite examples, living here in Santa Cruz, Jack O'Neill, the category designer of the surf wetsuit. And when you buy a wetsuit from O'Neill, I don't know if it's still the case, but it was for years, there's a picture of Jack on it and a quote that said, "I'm just a surfer who wanted to surf longer." Well, if you're a surfer and you ever surfed in Northern California and you went out there with board shorts and a wool sweater, which is what people did before Jack came along, you can relate to that because if you got 45 minutes in that, you're doing well. It's fucking cold. And so this problem called, hey, I wanted to surf longer. Well, we can relate to that problem. That then sets up the solution. And when people understand the problem/opportunity, then they become interested in the solution. And then, of course, the third piece from a POV perspective is how your product or service, or your idea for that matter, you might not be actually marketing or selling anything, bridges the gap between the problem/opportunity and therefore the solution. Okay, so with all that said, why do I love the ABT? The ABT takes the thinking that we did around points of view and does a fantastic legendary double click on it and says, here is a shit simple, insanely powerful way to write an instant POV. And that's why the and button therefore model is pure genius. It allows you to relate to people. Then it gives them the but, which tees up the problem, and then the therefore, which points the way to the different future, aka solution. And so it's pure genius. And it's easily rememberable. Blah, blah, blah. And if you start to play with it, as I have since you taught it to me, just like anything else, you develop some prowess with it, starts working. You're like, wow, this shit, it's almost weird how this works.
You sent me, Chris, when we were talking about the ABT on your show about 6 months ago, the next day you sent me a screenshot of a tweet, the very first one you wrote. And let me read it to the listeners because this is just another anecdotal, or maybe there's ROI to this. I'm not sure, but check this out. Your tweet was most hashtag entrepreneurs would love to design a new category and build $1 billion business. There's your statement of agreement. But there is so much hashtag startup bullshit on Twitter, it's hard to know who to listen to. Therefore, meet at David Sachs. He knows a few things. You sent that out and you told me within 8 hours you had over 60,000 interactions with that tweet. And you were like, holy cow, this is weird, scary. I guess it works.
Yes. And this is maybe a part of the story I didn't complete with you. As I've continued to play with the ABT over time, because of course you were on my podcast, we talked about it, and you were teaching me how to perfect it essentially on the podcast, and I played with it the next day. Well, all of our listeners know that's exactly what I'm doing because they heard you teach me. And so now whenever I do it, I will get direct messages from people going, I saw that ABT in that one. And I give them a wink, wink, and a pirate flag. And I say, hey, this is all inside of the pirate tent.
Ah, that's funny. That's the thing I'll get sometimes pushback when I'm teaching it. People say, well, Park, it isn't so obvious people are going to know exactly what I'm doing. And I'm like, no, if they don't know about the ABT, they have no idea what you're doing. And by the way, it's that limbic subconscious system that laps this stuff up. It's a cause and effect machine in there. And all you're doing is starting a story loop with that and. You're opening it up wide open with the but. So you have that cause and effect pattern seeking brain saying, how does this finish? And of course, you close with your CTA. It's funny that your listeners now are catching on. I think that's great.
Yeah. And it's, because they're category designers themselves. So many of them are playing with the technique. And when they see me play with the technique, and this is kind of a side point, but one of the fun things about working in this area, which I'm sure you experience as well. So I'm going to say this, it sounds like a statement, but I actually mean it more as a question, is for category pirates to be successful, we have to continuously create and design the category of category design, which means we are doing what we're preaching and teaching every day. And so the people for whom they want to learn with us along this journey, they are watching us practice the discipline in real time. And there's something very meta about that, because most teachers teach, they're not doing. And in order for us to teach what we teach, that is to say, the ability to design new categories to move the world exponentially forward and create different futures, we have to do that. We had to create the category of category design. One of the reasons we've been successful with category pirates, another one of the reasons the thing shot up and to the right, we started to call it a mini book newsletter, not just a newsletter. And the reason we did that was a complaint we were getting as well, and the newsletter is too long for some people, right? And we're like, okay, when you buy a new book, and it's a 400-page book, you have no expectation that you're going to sit down and read that book in one sitting. And the aha that we had was with newsletters, people had an expectation that when they got it, they could sit there and read it and be done. And if it's a newsletter that takes 30 minutes to 45 minutes to read, often that's not the case. You're either going to read it in pieces, or most of our readers pick a time and they sit down just like they would with another publication that they look forward to getting. And so the minute we said it's a mini book newsletter, we reframed it. And then people identified it as a cherished book as opposed to a too long newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, my point in all of this is in order for us to continuously create and build the category of category design, we have to be using category design principles in our work. Just like with you, to teach the business of story, you have to be practicing the business of story all the time. And so your super consumers, your mega fans, of which I am one, are always watching you do as you teach. And there's something really cool about that.
Yeah, that direct to creator concept. I'm a huge Ben Folds fan. Just I'm a piano player. I love his storytelling. I love his wit and his music. And when COVID hit, he was stuck in his apartment in Sydney, Australia, and he went on, Patreon for I think it's $9 a month. I could go in live sessions with him, ask questions, watch him write music. He would say, "Send me your songs, and I'm going to listen to them, and then I'm going to offer up critiques as we go through." I mean, it was brilliant. Well, now he's super busy. He's back touring. He's trying to get this new album out. And what he does is he's like writing a new song right now. And he sent it out to all of us on Saturday. And he goes, "I actually did this last night and I'm getting there. I like this, but I know I've got to sleep on it. I just want you to hear where I am." So it's just him sitting down to a Yamaha electric keyboard, him singing, not always in tune, and he's playing the song that he wrote, lyric and everything. He finishes it just like, "Okay, yeah, well, that's where I'm at. I'm going to hit the sack. I know I'm going to wake up in the morning with some more ideas, but I just want to let you all hear where I am on it." That was unheard of a couple of years ago. COVID brought it out. And so essentially, what you guys are doing are the exact same thing. You are sharing your ideas live in living color. Some of them aren't always going to fly, and some of them aren't always right, but you're putting them out there and you're saying, "Here's what we think. What do you think of what we think?"
That's exactly right. And there's this interesting line we're trying to walk, which is on one hand, we want to do legendary work. So when cold presses publish and it hits your inbox, we want you to know that we think what we just sent you is legendary work, because we do. And we wouldn't send it to you if we didn't. And it didn't meet the criteria that we've been talking about. However, there's this other part of this that can be misconstrued, so to speak, which is it's okay if it's not perfect. Look, we take a lot of care to edit it and to make sure the right there is there and the right the you know we're writers and we care about writing and the commas are in the right. So all that we do care about that, but you know what? Invariably, there are a few mistakes in every newsletter. We tend to catch them. Our readers tend to catch them. They'll send us a quick note and we'll update it. But in no case is that a problem. So on one hand, we work super hard to get it as legendary as possible. But on the other hand, anybody who's a creator of anything knows that you could polish that thing forever. Now, I have friends who are writers who've been working on a screenplay for 10 years and have never fucking published anything anywhere. That's a shame. And so there's this line that is a powerful line that we try to play on, and they certainly encourage others. On one hand, absolutely do legendary work. And at the same time, you know what? What joy do you get by seeing him in action? What joy do you get by his radical transparency and his sort of willingness to say, "I'm not some asshole on the mountain," like the hustle porn stars. He's not monetizing envy. He wants you to know he's a real guy, that he's struggling, that he's creating, that he's having fun, that he's not having fun, and he's asking you for input and feedback. And in so doing, he's co-creating his next song and his next record with his super consumers, just like we are always co-creating our next book with our super consumers.
Yeah. Chris, have you ever put any of your short books out and wished you hadn't? Was there anyone out there that like, "Oh, that one wasn't quite ready. We should pull it back"?
Nope, not really. We know when we hit send, when we hit publish, we thought it was great. We look at some of our work from a while ago and we look at what we're doing today and we go, it's a little rough compared to where we are now. But look, hopefully that's always going to be the case. There's so many people in this fucking business who try to put themselves above everyone else. We're not trying to pretend to be anything other than exactly who we are, and guys doing what we're doing. That's it. We're human beings. We have all the same hopes and fears and dreams and disappointments and challenges in our lives as anyone else. We're not proclaiming to have the answer to all things. We're trying to be students. There's an expression in martial arts called white belt for life. There's you hear about the beginner's mind a lot, things along these lines. You can't be a legendary teacher unless you're a legendary student. And being a legendary student is the only way to be a legendary teacher, right? So we try to be as cognizant and as humble around these things as possible, and at the same time have a deep commitment to legendary work. And that when it hits your inbox, we think it's legendary, and yeah, maybe we use the wrong there, or maybe that thinking will evolve over time, and it'll get much crisper in 6 months or a year, and our first attempt at an idea will look silly in 6 to 9 months or however. But so be it. It's called learning together.
Well, Chris, this has been a legendary interview, by far my longest in 350 plus shows. Thank you for being here. Where can people learn more about you, sign up for your mini book, newsletter, Substack, all that good stuff?
Lockhead.com, two H's, no K, LOCHHEAD.com.
It all happens right there.
Everything hangs off. Anything we've talked about today, any work that me and my partners are involved with, hang off of there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you are a blessing in my life, man. We got Thomas Schwab introduced us many years ago when you came out with your book, and you were first on the show. And then I read the book, and I'm just so glad that you came into my life here. And thank you so much for having a reprised appearance here on the Business of Story, man.
Anytime, Park, you're a gift in my life. Love Tom Schwab. He's been a gift in my life since the very first conversation I ever had with him. Interview Valet is an incredible company. And imagine if he had not have introduced us. And boy, I'm grateful that he did.
Same here. Well, thanks. And thank you all for listening to this edition of the Business of Story. If I can be of service to you, come on over to businessofstory.com. I've got the brand new, the ABTs of Branding course on the heels of the ABTs of Selling course that you can get now at businessofstory.thinkific.com. And know, as you do that ABT for your brand, think about what Chris has talked about today in your brand point of view. Get his book, sign up for Substack. I'm telling you, it is the best investment you will ever make in your marketing career to get the wisdom from these three gentlemen. Fun reading, irreverent, which I love about it. They pull no punches, and the stuff's really, really smart. So check that out. And of course, join me next Monday when we will have another story artist just like Chris right here for you. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for listening.